here. Today we're taking a look at a 1919 International Harvester Company Flaming 4. This tractor is rated 1530 horsepower, which means it can develop 15 horsepower pulling and 30 on the belt. This tractor was used in the turn of the century, right around, it was produced from 1917 through 1921. It weighs approximately 9,000 pounds and is a 4-cylinder tractor. Back in 1918, this tractor new cost approximately $1,900, which was a big investment for a farm. So a lot of farms would go together on a co-op to work together to purchase it. Several farms together purchasing one tractor, and then throughout the season they would rotate that tractor through the farm, and all the farmers would help sort of on a threshing bee as they travel from farm to farm, harvesting and plowing. So we can take a little look around the tractor, look at some of the unique things that we see here. This is a unique radiator in the sense that this is about the time that that tractor companies decided to start putting forced air radiation on tractors. A lot of them prior to this had just exhaust that would, create a draft through the tractor. This one actually has forced air by a belt and fan. So very similar to what you have in your cars today, this radiator does the same purpose by forcing air through fins to cool that water that goes through your engine. This was your power transmission back then. Before we had a power takeoff, which is located on tractors today, or hydraulics, we used everything with a flat belt, which is this device right here. You got more power out of a belt, or your belt horsepower, which in this case is 30 horsepower, compared to your transmission or pulling. That's why tractors back then had 2 horsepower ratings. This was very important because depending on what you were using that tractor for, you wanted to make sure you were buying what was appropriate for your farm. So in this case, if you did a lot of belt work, this would be 30 horsepower. That would be the horsepower that you'd be focused on more so than the drawbar. Typically these tractors ate up about 50% of their horsepower just with moving themselves. This tractor weighs 9,000 pounds, so it takes quite a bit of horses to get that in itself up and moving. So again, about 50% of your horsepower was drained just with moving the tractor itself. So that left 50% for whatever pulling applications, whether it was road graders or plows that you needed it for. Another couple of unique things about this tractor. If we look right up here, it might be kind of hard to see, but we see this black box just behind the radiator. These tractors, unlike today's conventional engines, are forced oilers, but they do not recycle the oil. So here we are constantly adding oil to a pump which lubricates throughout the engine and throughout the machine. That oil will then collect in the bottom, or in some cases, depending on the tractors, will get dripped onto the gears and then eventually runs on the ground. This oil is a one-time use. We put it in the pump, it goes throughout the engine, and then eventually lubricates the engine, and then is disposed of or drips out or is put on gears for that final use. So it's a one life oil, if you will. Just looking at some of the other really cool things. This is powered by a Magnetos, so there's no battery on this tractor. You crank it by hand at this location here to start it over. And this Magneto actually generates its own electricity. There's a magnet and a coil that spins, and it generates its own electricity to cause spark to go to the spark plugs for that ignition. So that's kind of a key thing that's a little different than today's engines, is that Magneto. This ball on the top over here, that's the governor. Inside that is a rotating or spinning centrifugal force governor. So as this engine speeds up, it actually limits the amount of fuel that can go to the tractor to keep it at a constant speed. This keeps the engine from going up and speeding up and slowing down, kind of keeps it at a constant speed. We can take a little look around here. This is actually one of the first tractors of that time period, or one of the earlier tractors of that time period that also started using guards for that safety. Safety wasn't the utmost concern in this time period. It was all about functionality. So guards oftentimes were put on tractors, and as soon as they got to the farm, they came off because it was easier to work on them and provide maintenance with those guards out of the way. So quite a few guards were lost throughout time, but this tractor was one that maintained its all original guards, so that's really kind of something cool to see. Another unique thing about this tractor versus a lot of them of its time period is this tractor is a chain drive tractor. So if we were to pull open this red box right here, we would see a sprocket and a chain that would go to this drive sprocket here. A lot of tractors back then were gear driven. So around this time period, there was no cookie cutter way of building a tractor. Now today there pretty much built in a very similar fashion by different companies. Here, no one really knew what the tractor was. There was no design for it yet, so everyone tried something different to figure out what worked. This is one of those cases where they decided to try a chain drive system to see if it was a little better, a little quieter than gears, and had a little less wear on it. Taking a look at the back of the engine, we can see that this is a 4-cylinder. The blocks are casted in 2 cylinders each, so we have 2 cylinders on one side, 2 cylinders on the other. Right above that, you see something which is really unique to this specific tractor. When this tractor was designed, it was designed with 7 different carburetors, as opposed to most traditional tractors of its time had 1, maybe 2. This one had 7 different carburetors. So it started out at the very top. There was 1 carburetor, and that's what you use to start the tractor. This tractor would be started on gasoline, ran for a while until it warmed up, and then once it was warmed up, it was switched to kerosene. Now, right above the engine, each cylinder has its own carburetor. So there's 1 at the top for starting. The 4 right above each cylinder were for running kerosene, so those ones were kerosene exclusive. And right above those, we had 2 in the middle. Those 2 in the middle served a really unique purpose. When you run a tractor on kerosene, kerosene was more available back in that time period because it was readily available for kerosene lanterns. So kerosene was more available and about half the price of gasoline. So that was the fuel of choice for farmers. One really cool thing is when you run a tractor on kerosene, your engine needs to be hot and stay hot for it to burn that kerosene effectively. The caveat to that is sometimes your tractor can get too hot, and that kerosene will actually pre-ignite or expand and blow up before you want it to in the cylinder. So to combat that or to prevent that from happening, you would actually inject water with your kerosene into the engine. So essentially you're burning water with your gasoline in the engine as it is running. So those 2 carburetors that were in the middle, those were exclusively for adding water. So at the top we had gasoline to start. Then we had 4 at the bottom for each cylinder running kerosene, and then when you needed them, you would use the 2 in the middle to add water to the mix. So that's something that's really kind of unique about that. If we notice, that exhaust pipe is pretty tall. That's to get that exhaust up out of the farmer's face because this is a tall platform. One thing about big tractors is you need to have the ability to see out them. So if I'm standing up here, this is still about at that height that exhaust is going to be in my face. So it kind of looks unique having those exhausts stick way up there like that. But again, that was just one of those ergonomic conveniences that International Harvester tried to build into their tractor.